Welcome to Take 3, coming to you on WTSR Radio 93.1 FM. I'm Nikki Nailbaum.
And I'm Bill Nobes. Each episode of Take 3 brings you one independent artist, 3 songs performed live, and an in-depth interview about each song. This session was recorded on July 3rd, 2022, from the House of Robot.
This episode's artist is Martin Howth. Martin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Martin Howth is a solo looping project of jazz vocalist Audra Mariel of Audra Mariel and a Real Human Jazz Band. All loops are generated live without the use of tracks nor digital effects. Varied sound is achieved solely through the manipulation of the human voice. The name is a spoonerism inspired by the heart-of-mouth idiom. It speaks to the feelings evoked with the inception of the project and nods to the fun places one's heart may end up. On one's sleeve, in one's mouth, lost, broken, mended. The music has been described as ethereal, even meditative, but also features catchy hooks and thoughtful lyrics. Martin Howth's debut album, The Wayward Warbler, was released in December 2018 and is available on all digital platforms and CD. The second release, The Flurmannerys Present, a Howth Concert, is a live recording made in the spring of 2019 and is available on BandCamp and CD. Her third album, Dissonance, will be released later this year. Did I say that right? Flurmannerys?
The Flurmannerys.
Yeah,
it's like a combo of both of their names. It's Flannery and Furman. They're a husband and wife, and so they called themselves the Flurmannerys. The Flurmannerys Present, a Howth Concert. It's a tongue twister. It really is. It's because it was a house concert, but a house concert. So it sounds like it was really silly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And let's go to the first song.
This first song is called Manteater. Manteater.
Murderous manted, sage agency, stiletto hands fold in supplication. I want to be, I want to be, I want to be a man-eater, a man-eater. Intently she sits and stares and stalks, fluidly gliding her head as it cocks to the side, as if to ask, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Serene in her hide, she's cloaked in the open, displayed on pink silk for squatting in ash. This effigy seductively shifts and sways. They won't get very far. They won't get very far. charismatic, sage, ancient seer. Stiletto hands fold in supplication. I want to be. I want to be. I want to be a man-eater. A man-eater. Spindly precision, she leaps away. Keep still, she soothes them, embraced by her daggers. They twist as if to kiss. She'll taste what they truly are. She'll taste what they truly are. I pray you, guide me home. Guide me home, I pray you, guide me home. Guide me home, I pray you, guide me home. For I want to be, I want to be, I want to be a man-eater, a man-eater, murderous mantic, sage ancient seer. Stiletto hands fold and sage ancient stiletto hands fold and sage ancient stiletto. I want to be. I want to be. I want to be a man-eater.
Before we start on the first song, I do have a question in your bio.
Okay.
When you say it's a spoonerism inspired by Heart and Mouth, which I love.
Thanks.
It speaks to the feelings invoked with the inception of the project. All right. You left that door open there.
I did.
So if you can, tell us about those feelings.
So that's a loaded question for my brain. I've been singing jazz for like, I don't know, at the time that I started this, maybe about 10 years from when I was like in my early 20s. And I never studied music. I have a theater background. Only whatever training I received, it was with my theater degree. I quickly learned that wasn't the industry for me. Not that the music industry is much better, but it's a sort of a lateral move, but it's a little bit different. But when I started playing with jazz musicians, I couldn't really communicate musically because I lacked the language and I didn't read. And that became very frustrating. And as part of a music series that I was hosting, a friend of mine who's in a jazz band with me put together this project called the Visitors Quintet, where he'd get 5 acoustic instruments together and everybody would compose a piece, an original piece for the night. They would go to this location and everybody would play everyone else's original piece as a band. It's such a cool concept, but they were visitors and they would never visit the same place more than once. So they came to a series that I hosted, and my friend Cody McCory, whose project this is, invited me to as a guest, like a sixth artist. He's like, I'd like you to write a song. And this was before Martin Howth existed. I had my little jam band pedal, and I wrote this song, and then trying to communicate with these musicians about like how they can join in, because I was looping everything myself, and was like, well, can you just layer in, and it'll sort of crescendo and then kind of peel away. Like, that's the best way I could describe it, which to me is like more visual and stage oriented, where I'm telling, just peel off, you know, like into the wings. And it was terrible. It was a terrible experience. I did a really bad job, and my poor friends were so encouraging and kind. And I had one friend, my pal John Francis, with whom I am fortunate enough to play music now, was encouraging of me and told me not to stop doing it. And it was that heart in mouth. My heart is in my mouth when I'm writing these lyrics, because it's something so personal to me. My heart is in my mouth because I'm absolutely terrified of performing this and sharing this. I'm so used to interpreting someone else's words, and the thought of having to share my own with people is just, that's the imagery that comes up for me. So that's a long way around to describe, but that was the project's inception, that first night before there was even a name for it. And that's how I came to be like, well, this is the name. And I guess I'm doing it now, you know? So that was it.
So you started in theater.
Yeah.
And then when you moved to jazz, were you just a vocalist, or were you
Yeah, I was a
instrumentalist?
vocalist, not an instrumentalist. I started singing jazz because I was in a production of Godspell at Brookdale Community College my freshman year of college, and the band leader, the musical director, was a jazz musician. And he took me under his wing and taught me everything, helped me build a repertoire, would like bring me out on gigs and stuff. And then that was the beginning of it. And then I continued to sing. I took a break in college, went off to finish my degree. And by the time I was finishing my degree, I was booking work and like using it as like a side hustle, which was fun.
What character? Godspell is one of my favorite plays ever.
I guess Robin was the character. Day by Day is the song.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we used our names.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Robin's the character. But yeah, that's day.
Now, when did you discover looping, and how did you come to that place?
I had seen other people loop. I think my first exposure to it, that I realized that was what I was watching, was someone shared with me the Tune Yard's Tiny Desk concert. Someone sent me a YouTube link, and I was like, what? And it was amazing and so high energy, and like multiple instruments and stuff, and I couldn't even get over that it was happening live. And then I realized that I had been listening to people who looped, like Andrew Bird is a violinist, multi-instrumentalist who loops. I had seen another jazz vocalist loop in a live performance. Her name, oh my gosh, I can't. Cyrilla May was her name, and she did like a version of Fortunate Son where she looped all these harmonies. It was so cool to watch. And I'm like, I really think I might want to try this. And I was in a very short-lived I think that they would all resent the word fusion, but it was sort of a jazz fusion band. And I was writing original music. One of my first writing experiences with this guitarist. And he suggested that I start using a looper. This was, I had mentioned to you earlier, the guy who lent me this Ableton program and this board. He was like, you could do this. And then my friend Kevin Grossman, who's the drummer in that band, and the drummer in the jazz band that I worked with at the time, was like, here's the jam band pedal. Like, why don't you try this? And I did. And I think I started writing, I wrote like an intro to one of our songs where I looped an intro. And that was the extent of my looping in that band. But when that band broke up after like 2 performances, I thought I would continue. I held on to the jam band.
Cool.
Yeah.
The looping is so cool. I've heard someone say something about music or something about art, how you're playing with, I forget the art part of it, but with the music part of it, you're playing with time. Mm-hmm. And the looping is just a really cool way to play with time. So yeah, it's very fun to watch you manipulate that.
It's a wild adventure. I was telling you, sometimes I miss those button hits. And then it goes off the rail. But yeah, no, it's a fun, and I like the idea of layering words, because sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes it was like happy accident, unintentional, where it highlights a word that I'm like, oh, I like that word. Like sometimes the word is, it like the image I'm thinking of is Homer Simpson, like going back into the bushes, and every once in a while it peaks and you hear it again and you're like, oh, that word. And it's, I don't know.
That's cool.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, let's talk about the first track, Man-Eater. Murderous mantid, sage ancient seer. Now, I was caught by, in your lyric sheet, everything is lowercase, and then we get to who do you think you are? And that just jumps out. What does that mean to you?
This was inspired by a very specific incident. I was walking from my car to a laundromat, like from the parking lot, and I was carrying laundry, and I hear someone yell, "Hey, slow down a bit." And I turn to see who would have said this, and there's like sun glaring, and I can't see their face, but they're laughing. And then as I turn, I'm stopped in front of their car, and this male voice just goes, "That's it." And I was like, ugh. And I walk, in that moment, I get I just freeze. I can't think of anything, even like, even screaming profanities at a person. I can't think of anything to say. I'm so shocked that it just happened. And it was like some guy just being a jerk. But I walked into the laundromat and wanted to completely disappear. And I got so mad. And I'm like, what would be a role model for me? Like, I wish that there was someone that I could channel. Oftentimes I think of my mom because my mother is better at responding in the moment. But I came up with a mantis because, I was like, yeah, I would eat their faces off while they're still alive. I wouldn't want to have sex with them, but I would eat their faces off while they were still alive. So that's where the "who do you think you are" comes from. Because that's what I want to say. But I just get like, I become like this big, like little.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know what that's like. And I was going to ask you, what is being consumed?
Oh, their heads.
Their heads.
So when she'll taste what they really are, she's eating their heads, their brains, like whatever. She's eating that part so that she'll taste what they really are.
No, I forget what line it was, but I made a note to ask you if consuming others also serves as an awakening for yourself.
I would say, that's an interesting insight. I think it's this, there's a part in there where everything cuts out and it's this guide me home, the cut moment. There was something about, and again, this is the idea of like, who would be my role model? And that's the awakening of self, like wishing I could be more like this. But there was something I read about mantises, of course, when I started jotting down ideas, was that in French folklore, mantises were said to guide lost children home, which I thought was pretty cool. And this idea of like wanting that guidance when you feel like you're this big and wanting, because when I get back in my car after I've done my laundry, I can scream every profanity and think of what emasculating things I want to say to those. It's that spirit of the staircase. Have you ever heard of that? Which I think is another, it just happens to be a French thing. I'm not that into French anything. I know you know French.
No.
A little bit.
Just like 5 words.
But I guess it would be esprit d'escalier.
Escalier.
The spirit of the staircase is either you think of the right thing, the best comeback when either you hit the top of the stairs or the bottom. So whichever side of the staircase it is, you would have to walk back and be like, and this is what. So it's this searching, like that stuff is all within me. The who do you think you are is a really simple thing that's in me. That's finding a piece of myself, but that I can't find it in the moment. And I guess it's that hope of being that act of consuming someone else that maybe I would get the audacity if I ate your head and your brain.
Yeah, I feel like this is a good song too to teach children how to also eat heads and brains.
It's pretty violent actually. When don't know that whenever I have to talk about it out loud, I'm always like, oh yeah, it's a little bit, it's intense.
It's well deserved.
But it sounds so sweet. Yeah. When actually we're gorily consuming heads.
Yeah, we're eating heads. That's what it's about.
It's in defense, so
Yeah.
you know. I think it's a really good. It's a very good role model for people, because I feel like we all feel like that sometimes.
At some point.
So many times, it's like someone does something like that, and you wish you had the perfect movie line to shut them down and make them feel remorse for what they did, and we never get that a lot of the time.
Those moments rarely come where that satisfaction of saying those words, which is why I always end up saying them by myself. I'm someone, sure, let's dive into this. I will rehearse the things I want to say to people. I will anticipate what people's responses will be to certain things, and I will rehearse out loud, which apparently my dad does too, because I once confided in him that I do that, and he's like, oh yeah, you got that from me. I'm like, great, thanks. Because I do it all the time. Thank God for Bluetooth.
Maybe that's a good thing. Like, maybe you should, lead a class of, repeat after me. Shut the
Yeah. Who do you think you are?
Now, there's actually two metaphors in here that I was curious about. Splayed on pink silk or squatting in ash.
So they're different colors of mantises. Like when I was looking up the imagery, like we see those little green guys walking around, and gals, folks walking around. But I've seen like these really beautiful, almost like pink iridescent ones, and they blend, which is how also I imagine that they hunt things. But there are some that are more browns and grays, and so this idea that she could, and the idea of being splayed is that she's right there. And I also liked that the word is a little bit sexual, because she's confident and she's luring you in. It's all mixing things up a bit, because when they're being camouflaged, it's because they're hunting. When she's eating the heads off of the males, it's because they're mating. And it's actually not as common. It doesn't happen every time, I believe. It only happens, I think, if she's hungry. I think that's what I read, is that she's got to be like real hungry after or during the process.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens every time. Don't quote me. I'm not a biologist, I guess would be that. I don't specialize. There's a specific name for people who specialize in these things. It's not biologists, but
it's in there.
It's in there somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, so that was what it was.
Let's go to the second song.
This next song is called Dear Doreen. I wrote it after I purchased a child's autograph book at a flea market, and the autograph book spanned from the years, I think it was 1942 to 1945, and her name was Doreen. And what started out as a song about her and for her turned into more like a letter to my younger self about what's important and finding yourself, etc. So, Dear Doreen. Dear Doreen, melancholy child, they'll remind you of silver linings and always smiling, though it all does seem to go wrong. Dear Doreen, it doesn't seem fair all is much smaller. Find your resolve, think it over, and swear to remember always, always remember. You'll be okay if you learn to paddle your own canoe, dear Doreen. I'm yours till you tear it out. I'm yours till you tear it out. Remember always, always remember. You'll be okay if you learn to paddle your own canoe, dear Doreen. I'm yours till you tear it out. 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 Dear Doreen, I'm yours till you tear it out. You're asking for it when you kiss a boy under his nose. Things turn upside down. I'm yours till you tear it out. Yours till you know you are beguiled. I'm yours till you tear it out. Right there beneath the garden gate. Love is blind, but the neighbors say. I'm yours till you tear it out. I'm yours till you. Love is blind, but the neighbors say. I'm yours till you. Love is blind, but the neighbors say. Love is blind, but the neighbors say. Love is blind, but the neighbors say. You should remember always. I'm yours till you tear it out. I'm yours till you always remember. I'm yours till you tear it out. You'll be okay if you learn to paddle your own canoe. I'm yours till you Doreen. I'm yours till you tear it out. 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 I'm yours till you tear it out.
One thing I noticed as I'm listening to the tracks and looking through the lyrics, and we had talked about anxiety during sound check, and it's something that I've certainly had issues with over the decades. And as I read through the lyrics, I had a feeling, a fear in the lyrics, and that fear feels like to me it's a fear of not being able to retain agency. Yeah. Is that something that's in there?
Oh, for sure. And I was really surprised. Like that particular word that you used resonates with me a lot. It's in, I would say, certainly this song and the last song that I did. And I was like, wow, I never really thought of that theme, but you're 100% correct. Yes, it is. That's like a way of really distilling it down to like the phrase, yes, for sure.
Well, even in that first song, that person making that comment, that totally took away your agency. Because those of us who are anxiety, we either, what is it, fight, flight, or freeze.
Yep.
And like you, I'm a freezer.
Yeah.
mouth shut down completely.
Yes.
So I very much relate to, what you've written and what you've created.
Well, I'm glad. Well, I'm not glad to hear that, but I appreciate your sharing that with me. Thank you.
Now, you told us who Doreen is.
Yes.
And that's an interesting story. Mm-hmm. Now, you say that it became... Did you say in the intro that it became more about you?
Yeah.
And when you say, I'm yours till you tear it out...
So this book, it's cool because it was like over the span of about 4 years, and I'm watching like this girl was from Pillow, Pennsylvania. And I looked up Pillow, Pennsylvania, because of course I had to. And the population was something like, I don't know, it was like under 1,000 people back in like 2018, like something wacky. Like there's not a lot of people that live in this town, and there was like maybe 20 kids in this school. And it's the same kids writing year after year. And you know how in a yearbook, maybe we would write like, stay cool in summer, see you in the fall. Like these kids were writing little rhyming couplets. So the lyrics somewhat, I mean, I embellished and filled in the blanks, but some of the lines in the song are taken directly from these little notes that they wrote each other. Like, don't kiss under the garden gate, love is blind but the neighbors ain't. When you get married and you have twins, don't come to me for safety pins. Two in a canoe go in for a kiss. All of a sudden it went like this, and it went like this is written upside down, like things like that. And so one common thing that I was seeing a lot is people were writing yours till you tear out this page. And I liked that as a line. And I thought about it in terms of, like, once I was really diving into writing it, I'm like, if I'm writing this as a letter to my younger self, it can also be mirrored back to me by my younger self responding to me. Like, I'm yours till you tear it out. I'm yours till you decide you're going to just crush me and that I'm not a part of you anymore. But we're kind of inseparable in a way. Like, it's almost like as an adult, I don't know if you've seen this popular thing that people are doing now where they're like, every time I talk badly to myself, I remember that I'm talking to them, and they'll show you a picture of themselves as a child. And to be quite honest, when I have to think about this as a song for Doreen, because if I think about it as a song for little me, I can't get through it. Mm. And this is like years that I've been performing this song. But the words resonate so much personally when I think of little me that I will start to cry if I'm rehearsing by myself. It's very, very straight. I'm a very emotional person though, so I guess. But that's where yours till you tear it out. It literally came from the book, but it means that it alludes to that inseparability. Mm-hmm. That these two people that seem to be so separate are really the same.
Now, I find it interesting that the canoe line was from the book, too. What was that?
Paddle your own canoe. And it quite literally, when I picked up the book, I opened it. I was at the Golden Nugget Flea in Lambertville. Mm-hmm. I opened the book to the page that said, paddle your own canoe. And me being me, I start to cry because it was like this, it's like, I have to find deeper meaning in this thing that I picked up. And I'm like, I need this book. And then I started thumbing through it and finding all this other, like that it was this real treasure. And I think, gave them $2 and it was mine.
It feels like to me that paddle your own canoe is the central theme of the song.
Yeah.
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 And that was the first thing you saw when you opened it.
That's exactly, and that's why I was like, oh, this is the important part.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That was a find.
It really was.
Yeah.
I love that flea market. I haven't been back in a while.
It's a good one.
It's a really good one.
Why are we whispering?
I don't know. Because we don't really, you don't want everyone to know how good it is.
I like the love is blind, but the neighbors ain't. Like, I feel like there's a lot of, this is more of a comment. I feel like there's a lot of stuff maybe alluded in the book. That they're kind of like giving advice of like, how to be or how to present yourself or who to love or...
That's 100% correct. That's 100% how I intended it. It was very much like well, I'm looking at this girl. She had to have been in middle school. And here's an example, and I think I'm allowed to talk about this based on the things that we discussed. You talk about, grooming kids to be a certain way, and here's this middle schooler being groomed in hetero, cis, hetero, cis mentality, so much so that, every other page was, always remember your boyfriend, Teddy Boyer. And apparently her pages from Teddy were torn out, which is a whole other dramatic part of this. But for me, when I talk about my younger self, I was engaged to be married. I dodged that bullet because apparently that person was sleeping with a bunch of other women while we were together. I don't think he knows that I know that, but no, maybe he will. But I was willing to give everything else up because I wanted a family and marriage, and that was what you did. And when it didn't happen, I think I realized that there were so many other things that I wanted and could be doing. And it's drilled into your head that these are the things that you do. This is the path that you follow. And there was a point in this book where someone had written in pencil, one of those marriage ones, whether it's like when you get married and you have twins or whatever it is. She went over it in pen, when you get married. And that to me, I'm like, why is this so important? And that's where that paddle your canoe comes in again. And yes, totally, don't kiss under the garden gate. Whether you're kissing someone else that they think you shouldn't be kissing, whether it's, and it throws all of that into question. Gender, sexuality, who they were all focused, the other children were always so focused on her boyfriend. And there was another little girl who I think was a sibling of his who was like, no kissing my brother, and then named the other brother, it was this big dramatic. And I'm just like, this is crazy. These are middle schoolers in the middle of nowhere in the 40s. But it just felt like, I don't know, that there's all these specific things that we're taught. We are totally groomed from when we burst forth. Totally, what colors go with whom, etc. Please, and it's still happening. So the idea that's totally, absolutely what the intention was with all of that.
Fascinating. Wow. Thank you for that look into the past that way. I feel like that's important. It's interesting, but it did read. It was all very intriguing. That I was flipping through it. I'd be like, wait, what? Which kid said this? The intention was probably more to write that story, but I always like when things morph into whatever they're going to be. You always set out with one intention, and but it's a cool book. And let's go to the third song.
This next song is called Axolotl. It's sort of about experiencing loss in life and growing new bits, as an axolotl does. Here we go. dancing feet she weaves. Do they even touch the ground? Her form of grace, it glides, kneel to rise, kneel to rise. It's easy in dreams. What if she always could? Inertia imagined. What if she always could? And waking life cuts in. Soil springs, planted feet. She sleeps with her head beneath the ground. Her faith betrays her eyes. Where he lies, there he lies. She freezes, refuses to leave. What if she always could? Inertia imagined. What if she always could? And waking life cuts in. What if she always could? Inertia imagined. What if she always could? And waking life cuts in. Losing rhythm, losing footing, losing him. Lose a memory, lose a lover, lose a limb. As she turns, axolotl, as she turns, axolotl, as she turns. As she turns, axolotl, as she turns, axolotl, as she turns. As she turns, axolotl, as she turns, axolotl, as she turns.
So you told us a little bit about axolotl and the metaphor where you can essentially grow back a limb. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. Do you want to talk about that?
I guess this really started from a very literal place where I learned a little bit about axolotls. The two things that I was like clinging to were that they can reproduce asexually, so they don't require a partner, which I'm like, God bless, and that they could regenerate limbs. And also, and I read this on the internet, and we know that everything we read on the internet is 100% airtight and true, but I saw this thing, I was watching this little thing about axolotl, and not only if they lose a limb can they regrow it, but in theory, and again, you can fact, I might be wrong, but in theory, you can take one axolotl's arm and take another axolotl's arm and swap them, and they will just accept the arm, and then they have new arm. Like, they're very resilient creatures, and they're super cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they have bones?
I imagine they do. I think they do. They're little salamanders.
Second question I'm going to look up.
Do axolotls have bones? I think they do. I think so.
Okay, the first stanza, because it does read like poetry. Sinew, string, dancing feet, she weeps. Do they even touch the ground? Her form, a phrase, it glides. Kneel to rise, it's easy. It's easy in dreams. Now, when I read that, kneel to rise, I get empowerment from that.
Yeah.
But then we have the question that it's easy in dreams, or the statement.
Mm-hmm. So this, and I started sharing this with you, and I'm comfortable talking about this. This, again, was like a super, super literal thing that a college professor of mine who was wonderful and a dancer originally had like shared a video of a dancer on like one of the various social media platforms and said something like, her phrasing is beautiful. And I looked at it and I said, she is a phrase. I have this idea that because, well, rewind, I have a form of muscular dystrophy. And I've been experiencing the effects of this from when I was probably about 16 it started, but I was, again, in the theater, in an industry where not only is it an ableist industry, period, and it certainly was like 10 years ago, 4 plus probably when I was pursuing it, but you're also told from the beginning that you're going to fail, that not only there's like thousands of people who want to do this, someone could be 2 inches taller than you and you'll fail. Someone could just read better than you and you'll fail. And then I had this extra thing of, oh, my legs sometimes give out from under me. I don't know why. I have trouble going up and down stairs. I can't get up from the ground or pop up from the ground or pop up from a seated position. I can't run. There's lots of things that my body won't do. And I, at the time, didn't have a diagnosis when I was in college. But it was this, but anyway, I would have to do things like dancing or whatever to the extent to which I could. But I started as a dancer when I was a little kid, which is also comes into play. But I have an appreciation for these things. Like I can watch dancing and be like, oh my God, it's just so incredible to me and beautiful. And I was watching this video that my professor had shared, and I was starting to write about that. And it came out of me where I dream of dancing all the time. I dream of dancing all the time. And in the dream, I'll always be like, oh, I can do this. And maybe this whole time I told myself I couldn't do this, and I could do this now. And was it just a mind over matter thing? And quite literally, my litmus test for figuring out whether my body is like recovered or however you want to describe it, is getting up from a kneeling position. And I would literally, in the dream, always, no matter what it is, if I'm running, if I'm, riding a bike really fast, whatever the thing is that I'm doing, that I'm like, wait a minute, I can't do this. I do this thing because that was the first thing that I noticed when I was younger that I couldn't do anymore. But I liked the image of it because it feels like this strength, like this rising up. And then again, much as like I like to build loops and then bring everything down, it's this image of like kneel to rise, and then snap back to reality. When you wake up, you realize, oh yeah, that was just a dream. Like I actually can't do those things.
And you say right here, losing rhythm, losing footing, losing limb, lose a memory, lose a lover, lose a limb. does that refer to your potential physical?
Well, and it also refers directly to, and if I were an axolotl, I could lose a limb. Do you know what I mean? And
see.
regenerate it.
And it would come back.
But
As she turns axolotl.
Yeah.
What would that transformation, what does that represent to you, turning axolotl?
I think it's not necessarily, whereas maybe I wanted it to be more of a literal thing, because there's two like stories kind of being alluded to simultaneously. It's the story of, this disability, which I don't think there's tragedy in the disability itself. I think of like Frida Kahlo saying the two tragedies in her life were the love of her life, Diego Rivera, that tragedy, because that was a tumultuous relationship, and her trolley accident, which totally destroyed her body, and she had, she suffered the rest of her life. I thought of those two things, but I'm like, the tragedy is not in the disability. The tragedy is in the loss of, or the sense of loss of agency. Whereas if I had the agency at the time, but years ago, there wasn't as much visibility for folks with disabilities. I didn't see disability advocates. I quit everything. Like when I realized I couldn't use this instrument the way I wanted to, I was like, I can't do this. Like if they're not going to cast me because someone's 2 inches taller, they're definitely not going to cast me if I have the disability and the other person doesn't. And I got so tired of hiding it and pretend, because I pass as someone who does not have a disability. And oftentimes to look at me, folks won't realize, which is when they notice. It's not when I'm moving differently. It's when they actually look and notice the way I'm moving that they'll be like, are you okay? So I get a lot of that. Like, are you okay? Is everything okay? Are you hurt? Because I typically, so the tragedy of it is that I lost that sense of agency. I gave up things in my life because I thought I had to. And I have a friend who used to tell me I was his mentor, which is crazy to me. And he went on to study at Yale School of Drama. And I tell him that I'm his mentee at this point. And he was the first to use that word agency with me. And he was like, because I had just explained to him, he was like, why aren't you in the theater anymore? And I was like, my friend Anthony, I'm like, it's this. I felt like I couldn't study it. I couldn't pursue it the way I wanted to. I felt like I didn't stand a chance. I didn't know how to advocate for myself. And he was like, you still can. You just need this. You just need to have more of a sense of agency. And he used that word with me. And that's the word that always comes up when I'm like, I loved physical styles of acting, like Jerzy Grotowski. I was fascinated by it and I would have loved to study it. But I'm like, but how? And he's like, all you need is to say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it this way. I mean, ultimately, I'm happy that I bumped myself onto this other path, because if you told me years ago that I would be doing any of this, I'd be like, absolutely not. I don't write. I don't do any of that. So it's like growing a new bit. Mm-hmm. I grew a new piece and I'm happy with the piece. And again, the disability itself is not a problem to me. It's what happened around it. It's my point of view around it. And that turning axolotl is realizing how resilient we are and having that sense of agency to push forward and either pursue the thing that you want to pursue or pursue a different thing, whatever it is, grow a new bit. And that was where it sort of stemmed from, this idea. So it's, again, super convoluted. My mind is like this web of weird nonsense. I don't know if it's the theater thing, like making those connections when you're trained to find subtextual support for things, and you're just like, and this is connected to this, and this is connected to this. So when I'm writing something, it's like, yes, and this, and also Frida Kahlo, and also axolotls, and also I had a dream about dancing. It's like, that's how my brain is just it's wacky.
Cool. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like I'm learning a lot, and I feel like I'm gonna cry. Thank you so much for doing this. I've heard you play these songs a couple of times at this point. Yeah, and I've
now they'll never be the same again. Right?
Yeah, it's really valuable to me to learn some of this stuff about them and about you. So,
thank you. Yeah.
I feel honored.
Well, I feel honored that you even asked me and that you're asking me questions about it. It's really, I could usually just hide behind whatever, vague symbolism or whatever, people don't usually pay attention. So it's like if they asking, which is why I guess I ramble in response. That's the anxiety and the over-explaining.
It's good. No, not even. It's perfect. It's yeah. Thank you, Martin Howth. Where can we find you online?
I have various social media platforms. My handle is Martin Howth. I think on Facebook it's Martin Howth Music, but Martin Howth on Instagram. I do have a TikTok, but it's just a video of my cat and me making vegan meatballs. That's all that's on there because I don't actually understand the TikTok. So you can feel free to follow, but you won't see much. And my website is just martinhowth.com, and it has other various links. Spotify as Martin Howth, and BandCamp is bandcamp.com/Martin Howth. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm on Instagram as Nikki Nailbaum Music and maybe YouTube.
Mm-hmm. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook as House of Robot, or visit houseofrobot.com.
Thank you for listening to Take 3. Thank you, WTSR Radio and the College of New Jersey.